Hey, I'm Shannon Rice, the podcast producer here at C-SPAN, and this week Lectures in History explores Columbia, South Carolina. University of South Carolina professor Kent Germany's class, History Outside, a Field School in Finding America, uses South Carolina's Palmetto Trail as a source for studying the history of the city. Professor Germany and his students examine parts of the Palmetto Trail's Columbia Passage, from Fort Jackson through city neighborhoods and onto the University of South Carolina campus, State House grounds, and downtown to the Broad River and Riverfront Park. Hang tight. Professor Germany's class starts right after this.
Okay, welcome to class today. How's everybody doing? It's all right. So this is History Outside, a Field School in Finding America. So all semester we've been going to different places around campus and trying to think about what we see, how the landscape impacts where we are and what we think about where we are. And so those big questions for the semester are, where am I? What's the next one? Can you remember that one? So we got, where am I? What happened here? And then how do I fit into that now? Right? So we're going to do that today, to think about where am I, what happened here, and how do I fit into it? And so to set this up in the long term, I'm going to pull a quote from a book called Ecclesiastes from the Old Testament. And I'll read it so that I don't mess it up, although there are a lot of different versions of it. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not yet full. To the place from which the rivers came, there they return again. So one thing I want us to think about as we look at this creek that we're standing over is what happens to water. What happens when it falls from the sky and it lands up the hill near the horseshoe, and enough of the drops get together that they roll downhill and they roll past here. And so I want us to think about this creek. Do we know what the name of this creek is?
Rocky Branch.
Okay, so Rocky Branch, and it's called Rocky Branch Creek, so it's like Rocky Creek or Rocky Branch. I don't know why it has all of those different names in it, but the title of today's lecture is Same as It Ever Was, Rocky Branch Creek as an American Story. And so we are going to reference the Talking Heads song, Once in a Lifetime, and we'll be talking about how time is plastic and human beings as part of time disappear and water disappears. But at the core of it is that these drops of water roll downhill, and they've been rolling downhill for centuries, and more than likely, unless there's an earthquake or a total catastrophe, they will continue to roll downhill from this point forward. So one idea that I want everybody to take away from today's class is, so this is History Outside, a Field School in Finding America. How can we find America here? So one idea is to think, find the low spot and look up. Find the low spot and look up and look around. Right? So we're going to be looking around, we're going to be looking up, and we're going to be identifying things that are surrounding us. But first, let's start off with, is this a creek? If you look down this way, you can look back that way. Is this a creek? Does this look like a creek to you? So Sean, is this a creek?
I'd say yes.
It is a creek. Why is it a creek?
Fits all the typical definitions of a creek, I guess, except for the fact that it's kind of man-made.
Okay, so fits definitions of a creek. What would be the number one thing that a creek probably needs?
Water.
So water, right? So it's got that, right? We all agree that that's water down there. It's not an illusion. So we've got water flowing. How deep is this water?
Not very.
Probably a couple inches.
So it's a couple of inches. It's flowing side to side. It's moving through. So we've been thinking about looking and listening and smelling and feeling. Tell me, what are the materials that you see just right here? Just think about how this landscape is an attempt to manage natural processes, the attempt to manage water flowing downhill. What are some things that you see?
Concrete.
So you see concrete. All right, so we've got concrete. What are some other things pretty quickly? So metal, right? So we can bang on that and figure out that's metal. What are some other things that you see? If you look off the edge here, what do you see trapped?
Water.
Trash, right? So lots of trash, right? This is an urban creek. So all the plastics and woods and things that flow downhill, they get flowed into here, and many of them have gotten trapped on the pylon beneath this bridge. Other things that you see around, what not necessarily human made, what are some things that we see?
Some trees.
Okay, so we see some trees curving around the edge. Other things?
Grass.
Grass. So what color?
Green.
Green. All right, so we've got the green. And what does green mean?
Healthy.
Healthy, right? It's life, it's photosynthesis, it's changing all the air we breathe that makes it possible for us to breathe. All right, so I want us to think about what it is that we're seeing. And ultimately, what I want you to contemplate is how what we see here is a map. And it's a map of human consciousness. And it is ultimately a map of dreams, right? And so everything that we can see made of concrete or brick or asphalt or steel or the cars, if we look across there to South Tower in Patterson, we see East Quad, we see the Booker T. Washington Auditorium, the Blatt PE Center. These were all things that were designed. People had an ambition for them. Almost all of them, there was a committee that met to decide what are we going to do, and they had to raise money to do it. And so we may be seeing these buildings, and we may be seeing concrete, but behind all of that is an American story, and it's a human story, and at the core of it is compromise and conflict. Right? So one thing about waterways is they often form boundaries, and they often create problems. And as we talk today, what we're going to in part talk about is how this water is a nuisance. Why are there steel bars keeping people away? Why has this been designed to shoot water as quickly as possible past this point? What looks dangerous about this water?
Because it's so like shallow, you know, it doesn't really have anything that could buffer a fall.
Okay, so do not dive head first for sure.
Yeah.
You probably don't want to jump off of this bridge and land. So it's not a fun creek. At least you couldn't tube down it probably. But what is potentially dangerous? Why spend as much money as they spent here to speed this water up?
Flooding.
So flooding. So what happens to this creek when there's a huge thunderstorm and it dumps a ton of rain on top of those hills and on top of those hills and over there, and all of that water gets channeled here? Right, so this is a couple of inches here. There is a gauge just around the corner down the hill just a little bit. It's normally at about a foot and a half. Last year on Independence Day on July the 4th, it had its record height of 12.9 feet. So there was a very big, very fast thunderstorm that dropped a ton of rain, and it raised this creek bed, at least down there, over 10 feet. And it often will do that in less than an hour. And then it often drops down less than an hour. So it's very quick, it's very fast. And so this is a problem. So we're gonna walk up and take a more circular look at what's around us. One idea to think about with Rocky Branch Creek is the pattern that it has, and that is ditch, park, ditch. Right? So if you think about that, ditch, park, ditch. Right? This looks more like a ditch. It's definitely something designed to get water through quickly. On the other side, we're going to go sit in a place that looks more like a park, and there are trees and leaves, and it's rocky, and it looks like a little mountain stream. Just up from that is another park. Just up from that is a major ditch and a tunnel, and then another park, and then ditches. And so this is an urban stream that has that pattern of ditch, park, ditch, or danger, fun, danger, right? And so we are in the dangerous part right now. And so if you've got your bags, we're going to slowly walk up here, and we're going to congregate right around where the water's coming underneath the street there, and we'll talk about what's going on around us in the landscape. Okay, so a couple of things that as we're walking through, we think about the look, listen, smell, fear. What are y'all smelling right now? Okay, so it's flowers, so it's springtime, or it's Columbia, South Carolina, springtime, so I guess it's going to be about 80 degrees today, and we are in late February. What are other things maybe that we're smelling?
Grass. I mean, yeah, the flowers and the grass.
Okay, flowers in the grass. So we're getting some of these flowering plants up here. What are we feeling? How are your feet feeling? What's the ground beneath your feet?
Soft.
So it's soft. It's not smooth, right? So it's going to cushion us. So we can think about our contrasts and what we're going to cross here. So this is Wheat Street, and it's not so much there anymore, but there's Rice Street. So on the old maps of Columbia, there was wheat and rice and indigo, and so these streets were named after the major agricultural products of South Carolina. When we get into the Carr era, they are going to rearrange how some of the streets work, and they're going to create 5 points out of a swamp. And Rocky Branch is what created the swamp that had to be dealt with in 5 points. And so this here is to try to deal with flooding, and it's ultimately to try to make it easier for cars to operate around here. And so let's move forward here so we can look around. What building do we have over here?
What?
Is that a building?
Oh, it's a PE center.
So it's a PE center. Can you see, does it have windows?
Not on this side.
Not many, like down at the bottom level. So the competition pool for the Gamecock swimming and diving team is on the back part of this building, and actually Rocky Branch flows along the edge of it. But if we think about this as a building in the brutalism style or the brutalist style of architecture, do we know who it's named for? So Solomon Blatt, right? So Solomon Blatt was Speaker of the House. He was a Board of Trustees member at one point, and so they named this building after him. The university did a study of its buildings and the people that they were named for, and in that study, one thing that it notes is that Solomon Blatt opposed desegregation, opposed black students attending the University of South Carolina, and used his power to block that. So it's 1963 when the first black students since the Reconstruction era are allowed to enroll on campus here. And the person for whom this building is named was one of the architects to try to prevent that. Worked to get at least one faculty member fired because they supported desegregation. All right, so we think about the South, we think about where we are in South Carolina. There is a river of race that runs through all of the history that's here. And so that's part of what we can see in this landscape. What is the red brick building over here? Okay, so this is Booker T. Washington. This was the African American high school. The university, in the aftermath of school desegregation, in the mid-1970s, bought Booker T. Washington High School and eventually tore down most of it except for where the auditorium is here and built things behind it. So East Quad is built where the Booker T. Washington High School was. Behind us in this direction, over to the left, is what is known as Wheeler Hill. This was an African American neighborhood, and the university procured the land from it through urban renewal and ultimately would sell some of it and be part of its foundation. But this part of campus where we are was an African American neighborhood, and the university would take over that neighborhood, and the African American residents who were deemed to be living in blighted areas and in a slum area that needed to be torn down for the goodness of the community would have to move elsewhere, except for a few. There's still some remaining pockets of African American homes just over this hill. Right, so we have the Blatt, we have Booker T. Washington, obviously named after the defining higher education administrator and political figure of the 20th century in the United States. As we move forward here, we can see these dormitories that dominate the landscape that way. Do we know what building that is over there, the kind of cream color? Okay, so it's the ROTC building. So this is in the post-World War II period. So this area here is the Cold War part of campus. This is the baby boomer part of campus. And so this is where struggles over race, this is where struggles over what America would be in its superpower status, they're going to be represented, if you know the history of the various things, in the buildings that are around us. And so the ROTC building is there, training generations of military officers just right across the way. And where we're going to end up on the creek bed, the ROTC building is going to be directly behind me. I want to point out this historical marker, right? So if we go back to the 1860s, go back to the 1850s, a person that lived in this area who would become a brigadier general in the Confederacy, who would be killed at the Battle of Shiloh, at least according to the historical marker that is there, died in 1861. Right? So this area here was an area that was the home of a Confederate general and has been commemorated to let you know that this is where somebody lived in history, and they were important enough for another group of people to put together some money and put together some research to put a historical marker in place. Right? So it was to think about General Gladden, it was to think about Solomon Blatt. Some people say Blott. I don't know if that's the right way to say his name, but I'm from rural Louisiana, and so it sounds like Blatt to me, so I can say Solomon Blatt. Booker T. Washington. We have all the places for students to live. And just across the way here is the Children's Center. And so if you're thinking about what's the value of history, the value of history is always trying to figure out the future. Right? So history is this compromise between the living about the dead in an attempt to try to figure out the best way to create a future, right? So the Whitney Houston song, right? The children are our future, teach them well and let them lead the way. Well, we're trying to teach them well over there. So what we're going to do is make our way across Wheat Street. And as we make our way across, I want you to think about all of the engineering, all of the design, all of the dreams, all the plans, all the committee meetings that make it possible for us to very easily walk across here. And we're going to walk, we're not even going to get our feet muddy. Even if it were raining, we could avoid getting our feet muddy all the way across and just contemplate all of the human mapping that has gone into place here. The last thing I'll say before we leave is if y'all turn around and look behind you. So if we think about university buildings as forests, and we think about forests that grow trees that get cut down to be turned into lumber or into paper, those dorms are green and they are scheduled to come down. And if you look, can y'all see the buildings behind it? What color are those buildings? So the red brick. And so that landscape, what's going to dominate the valley? So you're going to have the Gamecock Village up there that's supposed to open in the upcoming fall. Those green buildings will be gone, so you'll have red brick on that side. And then you're going to have the older part of campus on the other side of the Rocky Branch Valley to that side. But one thing that will be almost certain is that Rocky Branch is going to be here. And it may be the same as it ever was, right? So let's take a walk across the street and then we'll settle in by the banks of Rocky Branch. So as we're moving along, you can see the clues that have been built in about how we're supposed to behave in this space. So these arrows tell us if you're driving, which side of the street you're on. The paint here tells you don't park here. If we look back here, how they hide the infrastructure. So one of the things we do in this class is look for hidden stories, right? So I'm pretty sure that's a sewer pipe, right? So things that get flushed go there, but it's hidden. You can't see it from the street. It's got a little graffiti on it. But as we move through here, think about planned landscapes. Over to the left is a much more heavily planned landscape, but this is a wilder landscape. This is a hostile environment. The water rises here quickly, so these trees have to be able to stay rooted. The studies of this creek show that it's not a very hospitable place to live. It's got low biological holding capacity. I do not recommend drinking from it. It has very high counts of bacteria that are found in the human intestines. And so when it rains here, broken sewer pipes, other things get washed in. So it is a place of bacteria. It is a place where things get washed. If we can take a second here to grab a seat, we're going to make our way down where there's along the banks here, and we'll talk about Rocky Branch in a much larger history. And as always, when we have our class here on the creek bank, be careful and look for broken glass. And when you sit down, try to make sure you're not sitting on a jagged bottle that has been broken. Okay, has the smell changed? It has changed. What can you describe that smell?
Smell the water.
You can almost smell the water. Dirty. Okay, algae, or that category of water funk, which is a pretty good category. That's a pretty good descriptive term. So the wind is blowing this way, so you might be getting things coming off the water from there. So if you smell water funk, blame it on the water. That's one of the benefits here. You can also probably smell the mud, the dirt that's underneath you. This ground here stays wet for much of the year. I mean, this is where the water rolls down, so that's part of it. What do we see here as compared to that concrete chute? You know, we're just 100 yards or so away. What's different about this place? Yeah, Lily.
Really, you can tell it hasn't really been messed with that much. It kind of has its own path.
It has its own path, so it looks like it hasn't been messed with that much. Joy?
It also seems to be flowing like just a little bit, like not as fast.
So not as fast? Okay, yeah, so right here it's in a more of a pool stage, so that's designed to get that water out of there fast. Other things that we see here? Yeah, Nick?
There's a sandbank. There wasn't any sand out of that.
Okay, yeah, so we've got a sandbank, so a more natural flow of the water that's depositing sand over there. So there's this, a little place. So if you wanted to, you could probably go set up a little chair or put something down there, right? Anything? Yeah, Will?
There's still plenty of trash.
Still plenty of trash. Yeah, can you identify the product of the trash?
I don't want to out them, but there's a Zappos something.
Okay, Zapp's potato chip bag. Yeah, so it was Mardi Gras not too long ago. And this is a Zapp's, which was a Louisiana potato chip company. And this looks like potato chips in the Mardi Gras color scheme. So it has gotten stuck on this branch. I was here over the weekend, a couple days ago, and it was stuck there, and it is still stuck there, right? So it may not be stuck there for very long, but it has been for a couple of days, right? So we've got this creek. How does it look if you look that way? Does it look like you're in the middle of downtown Columbia, South Carolina? What does it more look like? Emily?
Turbulent, untamed, like it hasn't really been curated by mankind.
Okay, so looks untamed. Looks like it has, it's a great phrase from Emily. It looks like it hasn't been curated by mankind, right? The water's flowing, there are these bricks there. Does anybody have good enough eyesight to see what these trout stream boulders are? Does anybody want to go walk through this water I've just so lovingly described as filled with bacteria that can give you serious indigestion and other things? And so these are concrete blocks, right? So these are shards of concrete that somehow have been placed there, and they're there to slow the water down a little bit. They're there to create more of a natural kind of stream, but from this perspective, right? And so what happens if we're historians and we're storytellers that we're doing in this class? What happens if you just look that way? What kind of stream are we looking at? What kind of feelings do you get? So we got that look, listen, smell, and feel. What kind of feelings come from there? Lily?
It's something you could see in any hike and any mountain.
Okay, so something you can see from any hike in any mountain. and it's right here. We've had class here before this semester. We've talked about being here, but before that time that we met here, how many people had been down here? So nobody. So right in this class of close to 20 people, nobody had been down to Rocky Branch Creek. And so one thing about Rocky Branch is that it is hidden. It is along the edge. It is either covered up, put into a tunnel, or it's off to the edge of a space where lots of people go, right? So there's all of these students in the dorms, and yet this is down here. Over the weekend, there were people that had hammocks between the trees, and it was nice weather, and they were enjoying it, and the water funk was not a problem for them at that point. Yeah, Joy?
Oh, I had never even heard of it before this class.
So you never heard of it before this class, okay. Yeah, and so it has been here. So here's a quick little primer. So we think of Rocky Branch as an American story. Part of that is to think human beings in the American era have been in Columbia since the 1700s, at least in this particular area. Columbia itself is created to be the state capital in a compromise between the upstate and the low country. And so this piece of water that has been flowing through here was flowing at that point when there were indigenous peoples living in this area. There was some version of Rocky Branch Creek flowing somewhere near here. It's very likely that it wasn't exactly where we are right now. One of the things that happens over time is that it's an inconvenient piece of water. It is a nuisance. And people like to move it. And so it has periodically over time literally been moved. And so they changed the creek bed. So one question I'll throw out, is a creek the water in it, or is it the water bed? Is it the stuff that surrounds it? Is it the container, or is it the thing being contained? Yeah.
I mean, I would say both.
Okay, so both?
Yeah.
Okay, so it just depends. So you can't have, what would happen if we didn't have the creek here? What happens to water? Where does it go? Okay, soaks into the ground, or it evaporates, or it goes wherever gravity is going to send it. It just finds its way downhill, right? And so if we don't have something that is going to contain it and stop it at some level, then water just flows, right? So it is a relationship between the water and the landscape around it. So the water's constantly changing this landscape. Is it much easier to change this creek bed if you're water than it is that concrete chute? Yeah, right. So that concrete is designed to handle a lot of abuse, a lot of pressure, a lot of power. Okay, so Rocky Branch Creek, there is a map in the 1890s that show it on the other side of Blossom Street before this street over here, which is Pickens that we know of. So it likely had another path. When they created 5 Points and they started having commercial things in that 5 Points area, it flooded too much. It was too uncontrollable, too unpredictable. So they built culverts, they built ditches, and eventually they're just going to completely cover up Rocky Branch. And so now there is a tunnel that carries Rocky Branch from the Martin Luther King Jr. Park underneath all of 5 Points. It comes out just at the edge of a park up here, and then that's what we're getting here is this flow. So it's between 5 and 6 miles of stream. It is something that not too far away from here, it's almost impossible to find, but it's going to emerge very quickly. There are very steep hills on each side of it. Those send water through very quickly. So one of the reasons you have such a sharp bank here is how fast the water gets. For some people that are sitting up to the top, can you see anything peculiar about the trees on this bank? So we think about the curation of a space by human beings, and we can think about a space maybe being curated by water. Is there anything you can tell about the way these trees are bent?
They're bent, sloping.
So they're bent this way, right? So there's one that's almost a 90-degree angle. This tree right here is bent. The tree behind it's bent. Down here at the bottom level, there's a tree bent parallel to the water. If we look over here, there's this Bamboo. Can you tell us anything about the bamboo that maybe is a clue about how inhospitable where I'm standing can be? So what's the bamboo doing? So it's that way. So it's possible that somebody came through and did this bending and had a long-term project to just sort of make the stuff bend this way. But more than likely, it's the force of that water when those big storms come through and rush through here that have trained the vegetation to be pointed that way. And you can tell how high the water gets through here. You can see some of the debris line along the way. If you look across the way, you can look up and see, and it's a little bit better down the way, leaves stuck about where I'm standing on the other side. And so this gentle stream, when it becomes an extreme stream, gets very high, it gets very fast, it gets very dangerous. And at the end of today's discussion, I've got a couple of newspaper articles about people that have died in Rocky Branch over the past century or so. So Rocky Branch, we think about it as an American story and a Columbia, South Carolina story, starts at what was in the early part of the 20th century known as Valley Park. This was a white-only park, and it remained a white-only park until the Civil Rights era in the 2 decades after World War II. In the 1980s, it was renamed Martin Luther King Jr. Park. There's now the Stone of Hope monument to Martin Luther King Jr. in King Park. It has baseball fields. They have just tried to slow the water down there and done a massive water slow down project. And so if you go there, there are walkways going through a heavily curated natural area. So it's designed to look like a natural area, but part of it is to try to slow things down. So that's there. Then you get to 5 Points, which is an early 20th century development. Do y'all know what 5 Points is? Is this an important part of your life in college? I know they have changed some of the rules about drinking, and it's really hard to get an illegal ID and be able to drink underage anymore. And so 5 Points has changed a little bit. So right, that landscape has changed because laws have changed. But nevertheless, bars, restaurants, used clothing stores, vinyl records. It is not a highly polished new place. It is a place with old buildings in it. It goes underneath 5 Points. It comes out by the railroad track, shoots through Maxcy Gregg Park. Maxcy Gregg Park is started in the early 20th century because there was not a whole lot that could be done with that wet area, and so they turned it into a park. It flows under Pickens, which is one of those busy streets, and it ends up here. From here, it goes by the Blatt, it goes by what used to be the train station, it goes downhill and rolls through as a ditch, goes under Assembly Street, and it goes into the textile mill area. So those textile mills start in the late 19th century. The biggest textile mill in the world at the time was Olympia Mills. I think some of you in here might actually live in Olympia Mills. It's now a really large, beautiful apartment complex, mostly for students. And so textile mills operated for several decades and were the anchor to South Carolina's economy. And this piece of water rolled through it. This piece of water was a place that people that worked in the textile mills were certainly familiar with. And then what happens after that? So does anybody see Rocky Branch that lives in the textile mill area? It's pretty well hidden. It does go through one park that's down there. How many people know about the quarry? So if you look on Google Maps or you look on satellite maps, what is right by the river if we keep going that way? It's a big, huge hole in the earth. I think there's a 5K race now where you can run down to the bottom of the quarry and run back up. That quarry is not something that was there a half century ago. And Rocky Branch had to be moved. And so as the quarry developed, as they dug more dirt and rocks out of that place, they moved Rocky Branch. They couldn't move it farther than where it is now because it butts up against a railroad track, but it flows into the Congaree River there, right? So we've got 5 or 6 miles of stream that run through Columbia, that make their way to the Congaree. And then if we follow the writer of Ecclesiastes from, I don't know, 2200 or 2500, ever how many years ago that was written, where does this water go eventually? To the ocean, from a poetic sense, where? To the sea, right? And so it's going to historically flow through the Santee River to the sea, right? So we got a rhyme scheme, Santee to the sea. What happens in the 1930s to where this water is headed? So if we think about Lake Marion, Lake Moultrie. So if we look at a big map of South Carolina, there are these giant lakes that form from the Santee River that are created in the New Deal. And why did they create? What were they trying to get? What did this water have in it that the federal government and the mayor of Charleston and the governor of South Carolina and all these, why did they want to cut down all these trees, build these enormous dikes and dams to dam up the Santee, to take this water that's coming from Rocky Branch? What were they wanting from it? Energy. So they're building essentially holding ponds of electricity. And they're going to build these power generating facilities that will take that water, run it through turbines, and electrify rural South Carolina. And so if we think about that American story, the water that falls in such heavy quantities here and gets shot down into the Congaree River through the Rocky Branch Creek, makes it into the Congaree, joins up with the Wateree, joins up eventually with the Santee, and it's a source of power to turn light bulbs on, to fire up factories, to bring modernization to what was then seen as a backward South Carolina. Now they're also going to displace a lot of human beings that lived in that area. They're going to have to move out. There are going to be a number, it's mostly timber and it's mostly agricultural areas, but the New Deal fundamentally transforms the landscape. And so, is this water the same as it ever was? Is this just water running into the sea? Or can you, with enough money, with enough engineering, with enough dreams, build enough dams and dikes to turn it into something that makes the night into day, that extends things all 24 hours during the day? Is it the same as it ever was, right? So that will eventually flow into the sea. What they will find out is that not enough water was going down the Santee River into the sea. And so for Lake Moultrie, they build another dam, or they build another diversion canal that will take some of the water from Lake Moultrie and send it back into the Santee River. And then the rest of the water continues down the Cooper River. So if you know the Cooper River Bridge in Charleston, some of the water from here theoretically could be rolling underneath that bridge, or it could be rolling through the Santee River out to the Atlantic Ocean or out to the sea. All right, so we're just in one little spot here, but there are many prongs of a story that emerge from it. So we're getting a little bit close here toward the end, and I want to throw out a couple of ideas of what have happened here along Rocky Branch. Before we do that, I want to ask some questions. Why do we have time in the way that we tell it? Why do we have a calendar the way that it's set up? Why do we have seconds and minutes? Why don't we have some other way to tell time? Billy?
It's a way to break up your day and kind of make sense of how the sun rises and sets and what that means. Okay,
so how the sun rises and sets. What of our senses that we've been using today, what's the one that's most important for historically arriving at our current way of telling time? So if we think of the sun rising and setting.
Sight.
So our sight, right? So light wins out. You know, vision wins out in how time works, right? And that's much quicker. I'll throw out this idea of why did human beings not tell time by water? Why do they not tell time by rivers and creeks and streams? The ocean is pretty predictable, right? I mean, there are tides, there are waves that come in. Seems like you could probably devise something, but why does sight win out? Why does that become the way we tell time? So, yeah, Joy.
Water isn't everywhere.
Water
Isn't everywhere.
Okay, water isn't everywhere, so you may not be able to see it. You may not live next to a piece of water. How predictable, though, is water? So if you were going to predict the future based upon Rocky Branch Creek, most of the time, what does it do? It's this, right? So this would be a really long day, right? It's like, well, it's still at a foot, so we've been in our really long day. And then it would get up really high, and then it would drop down. It's like, well, that was a whole year, right? So I want us to think about how our conception of time, how we structure who we are and how we function in life is based upon these concepts that we had no choice in, but we've accepted it. And we now, how do you know what time it is? Can you look up at the sun and get out a sundial and figure it out?
You can get a basic idea of around what time it is, but you have to look at a clock or your phone.
Okay, so you got to look at a clock. So we now have machines that keep our time for us, that I think most of them are set for the Naval Observatory clock. So we got this nuclear clock that tries to keep exact time. And so we are as in sync time-wise as at any point in human history. But what happens if the electricity goes out and the clocks stop? Does time stop? Then what will we have to rely on? We'd have to look around and kind of figure things out and guess like, okay, sun's getting low. So, right, so electricity, the segmentation of time are things that we have been trained to accept. So one idea for us to contemplate is the role that historians play in understanding time. And so I'll throw out this notion that historians are people who have been trained in the science and art of time. And we decide how much time we're looking at. We decide when something starts and when something ends. But how much of that is us imposing our vision on time, right? So we're setting up those parameters. So we can take a creek here and think this creek has been flowing here. These drops of water have been rolling through here. They'll go up into the sky and come back down again, and it'll be this cycle over and over again. But how long are human beings around for that? How long do you expect to live? Ellis, how long do you expect to live?
70, 80.
70, 80. So the average age of death in the United States is somewhere in the 70s. For white women, it's above 80, right? So, you know, there are different factors that go into it, but somewhere in the 70s or 80s, that's kind of what human life in industrialized parts of the world come to. And so we've got about, let's say, 80 years here if everything goes okay, right? So as a historian, we decide what kind of time we're going to be dealing with. And so this is where I'll throw out a couple of lines from David Byrne and the Talking Heads, which I had y'all listen to. What did y'all think of this song? So this is Once in a Lifetime, and it has that phrase, same as it ever was. So you may have a quick, yeah, Lily?
It's one of my mom's favorite songs, so I've always been familiar with it, but I never really thought about the lyrics.
Okay, so one of your mom's favorite song. Your mom's pretty cool, I guess, right? Right? Other things, Bill, you shook your head.
It's just a good song.
It's a good song. It's got a good beat. You can dance to it. Do y'all know that reference? So that's Dick Clark. There was a TV show on the weekends, and so that was always what the kids would say when they were assessing a record. It's got a good beat. You can dance to it. So anything else about this? This song, what does Same As It Ever Was mean? And granted, this is a song that you get to decide what it means. We're not necessarily concerned about the 5 songwriters that created it. What is this about? So Will, you're an expert on time.
Yeah. I'm a history major, so I guess I am. It's kind of about how things will continue to happen regardless of us. I think it's about, it talks a lot about water flowing, continuing to flow, flowing underground, and that, as you touched on, I think it's just going to continue to happen here. It continues to happen everywhere. regardless of us sitting here or cameras rolling or anything.
Okay, so time happens, water's flowing underground, let the water hold me down, right? So, and I'll read a couple of these lyrics here. Starts off, you may find yourself living in a shotgun shack, another part of the world. You may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile. So, right, we're in an automobile world and culture. You may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife. Ask, how did I get here? Right? So that's partly what this class is having you address. Where am I? What happened here? How do I fit in? How did I get here? We just walked a little bit and ended up on a creek bank on the edge of campus at the University of South Carolina. We can say how we got here today, but in a bigger, broader sense. This song is asking some of those questions that the writer or writers of Ecclesiastes was asking. A few things here. Water flowing underground, into the blue again, after the money's gone. So what happens after the money's gone? What after the thing that's so important to human beings? What's left? This water's left. What meaning does this water have if you take the human meaning away from it? Water dissolving, water removing. And then these lines here. Time isn't holding up. Time is an asterisk. Time isn't holding up. Time is an asterisk. There's water at the bottom of the ocean. Where does that highway go to? Am I right? Am I wrong? My God, what have I done? Right. So this is the Talking Heads. This song came out around the time that I was about 5th grade, 6th grade. I spent most of my life thinking that the lyrics of this song said, "These days go by eating water chestnuts." Okay? So for much of my life, when I sing this song in my head, I think, these days go by eating water chestnuts, right? And so that's what's in my head. We didn't have the internet when I was in 5th grade or 6th grade. You had to go buy the album to get the lyrics for it, and sometimes they didn't have the lyrics in it, and so sometimes you just didn't know what the lyrics were. But now we can look them up, and we can go to David Burns' journal website and look at it. By the way, I'll say he has a really good book called Bicycle Diaries, where he takes a folding bicycle on tour and rides it around the places where he was performing and writes these essays about what it's like to be David Byrne riding his bicycle around places around the world. And so highly recommend that. It's one of our books in our long bibliography of books. So we think about time being an asterisk. We think about time dissolving and water dissolving. These are a few things that have happened along Rocky Branch Creek. 1903. Girl charged, this is a headline, girl charged with heinous crime, alleged to have thrown her baby newborn in. There's a big trial and big court case that comes out of this. In 1908, the University of South Carolina builds the Thompson Infirmary, which later gets a new building that's going to be known as the Thompson Health Center. This is designed to have an isolation wing so that when people have diseases that are communicable, you can separate them from students. So we all went through the pandemic here and understood. So in 1908, they're trying to figure out how to have students live together without making each other sick. Part of the description of that is that there were beautiful views of the Rocky Branch Valley. So you could look from the hill up there, down here, and see all the trees below. 1909, headline, met his death in front of car. White man killed near Rocky Branch Saturday night. Much of the newspaper is going to identify the race of somebody killed in their headlines. 1909, Maxcy Gregg Park is going to be identified, and that's basically where it's going to be set up where it exists today. So 110 plus years ago, that park, the land for it becomes part of the park that's over there right now. 1913, car fell from Rocky Branch Bridge near train station, pinning the wife and killing her. So the train station is now the California Dreaming restaurant that's over there. And so there was a car accident in that area a little over 100 years ago where a woman died in the accident. 1914, the local newspaper wrote this about Rocky Branch. I want you to compare 110 or so years ago to what you're seeing here today. Rocky Branch, which is ordinarily a grubby little town stream filled with oil here, smutty and dingy there. On sunny spring days, it's almost spring, on sunny spring days, actually sparkled through a bank thickly carpeted with new shoots and tangled vines of honeysuckle, right? So it's dirty, it's filled with oil, it's smudgy, it's smutty, but at the right angle, in the right slant of light, you can see the flowers and the greenery that's there. A few months before the stock market crash in 1929, this was the description of Rocky Branch. It was like a capricious woman, swinging first this way and then that, washing out a great curve here and left a sandbar there, and has made uncommonly pretty little pebble-strewn beaches, right? Little sandbars over. Here, long-legged mockingbirds walk the beach like flappers on the strand at Myrtle, right? So even in 1929, they were referring to Myrtle Beach as what? The dirty Myrt, or you said it. That's not the official Chamber of Commerce description of Myrtle Beach. 1949, there were massive floods. 1956, massive floods, exploding over its banks in every big rain. 1957, Mr. Leach fell into Rocky Branch near Assembly Street after watching a baseball game. Someone held his head out of the water to keep him from drowning. 1961, a massive storm goes through and leaves Rocky Branch as a raging torrent. On June 13th, 1961, 2 young black men drowned in Rocky Branch during that flood. About a decade later, in 1974, there was a major oil spill that's going to foul the waters of Rocky Branch. And so, as we think about some of the things that happened here, another I'll mention in 1970, in May, at Kent State University, 4 people were killed by the National Guard. That is going to trigger student protests and anti-war protests here at the University of South Carolina, which will lead to the National Guard coming in here and the state police. And just up Rocky Branch, on the other side of Pickens Street in Maxie Gregg Park, an actress named Jane Fonda was the lead speaker of an anti-war protest, and the local TV cameras filmed her. And so Rocky Branch, hidden off to the edge of the park, is the site of one of the major student protests in Columbia's history. And students that were on campus at that point, most of them remember that moment quite clearly. So as we think about, and we'll close things up here, what should we remember about Rocky Branch? It's an American story. It's a human story. Or is it just water flowing downhill? Is there anything that sticks out to you that maybe we should remember?
I was gonna say it's just water, and that like the stories that have like come out of it have been like due to human interactions with it.
Okay, so it's humans interacting with the landscape or interacting near the water. The water doesn't care.
Yeah.
At least as far as I know. Maybe, I mean, the Wonder Twins, if you watch any of those old cartoons, they were all about water and turning water into different things. So water seemed to have a consciousness for them, but for the most part, water, it's hard to figure out it has a consciousness, but it's the human consciousness, right? So that's what we're here for. That's the stories that we tell, how human beings have interacted with this landscape. Anything else we want to remember about Rocky Branch?
I mean, it's kind of cool to think that like there has been so much history, and even though it's just like pretty much a gross little creek, like people have thought that for years.
So it's a gross little creek. That's probably, we should probably turn that into the subtitle of today's lecture, Rocky Branch, a gross little creek.
People have said it in the news for years, so I mean, I'm not...
You're a historian, you're just saying what's in the evidence, right? Yeah, all right, so we have the water funk and the gross little creek with the potato chip bags, and there are other things floating in it, but in the right light, with the right breeze flowing through, it can be not just a grubby little creek, but it can be a beautiful place. And where I want to end here is for us to take 15 seconds and not talk and just look at the water as it makes its way to the sea. And so I will count in my head as we turn and look at this moment, right? What we've done today is taken a moment of history outside. And what will happen is we're going to look at this water for 15 seconds, and then y'all will get up and I will pick up your seats, and then we'll move, and hopefully we're going to leave no trace, and nobody will ever know that we were here, except for the fact that I'm wearing a microphone and there are people with cameras around and happen to be filming this. So maybe that will be remembered, but these roots aren't probably going to remember that we were here. The water's not going to remember that we were here. So let's take 15 seconds, stare at the water, and then we'll be done. Okay, and that's Rocky Branch Creek, same as it ever was. Maybe? All right. Thank you. We'll see you next class meeting.
Thank you.
Check out American History TV, either on our website at c-span.org/AHTV or on C-SPAN 2 every weekend from 8 a.m. Saturday through 8 a.m. on Sunday. Explore our nation's past with American History TV.